All right, we're diving into a story today that has all the ingredients of a classic drama. You've got family, a beloved neighborhood delicatessen, and of course, a whole lot of money. This is a business dispute that got so messy, so personal, it went all the way to court. This is the story of Murray versus Murray. And right at the very heart of this whole conflict is one seemingly simple question. Can you actually become legally bound business partners based on just a handshake, based on your actions alone, without ever signing a formal contract? I want you to keep that question in your head, because the answer, well, it's not nearly as simple as you might think. Okay, so let's meet our main characters. We've got three siblings, Timothy, Michael, and Eileen Murray. Together, they were running Murray's Delicatessen in Nyack, New York. And for a while, everything was going great. But, as you can probably guess, a massive disagreement over money and ownership was about to turn this family business into a full-blown legal battleground. And here is exactly where the trouble started. The deli needed to move to a new location, and one of the brothers, Timothy, he stepped up to the plate. He put up $225,000 of his own cash to get the new spot renovated and running. I mean, that is a huge investment, and it's one he absolutely expected to be paid back for. So you've got two completely different versions of reality here. On one side, you have Timothy, who says, look, we were a three-way partnership. We were all in this together. That means Michael and Eileen owe me for their share of that renovation money. But when he asked for it, they flat out refused. Their argument was shocking. They claimed there was no partnership at all. Timothy, they said, was just an employee. All right, so the court's first move, and this is pretty logical, was to ask the obvious question. Okay, was there ever a signed written agreement, right? I mean, if a contract exists, this whole case is pretty much open and shut. But as you can imagine, it wasn't going to be that easy. See, Timothy swore that there was a contract. He testified that his sister Eileen even drafted an agreement. They all made some changes to it, and then all three of them signed it. The problem? When it was time to show it to the judge, Timothy's copy had, well, it had mysteriously disappeared. He had zero physical proof. This is where things get a little technical, but stick with me because it's important. There's this major legal hurdle called the Statute of Frauds. In simple terms, it's a law that says for certain kinds of long-term agreements to hold up in court, they absolutely must be in writing and signed. And that repayment plan Timothy was talking about, which would have taken 10 years, falls right into that category. And so, just like that, the court delivered its first big ruling. Without a physical, signed piece of paper, the judge's hands were tied. Timothy's claim of a written partnership, it failed. His demand for the money was officially barred. This was a huge blow for Timothy. But, and this is a big but, the story is far from over. So, with the whole written contract argument dead in the water, Timothy's lawyers had to get creative. They pivoted. They came back with a whole new case, asking, what if their actions, the way they ran the business every single day, what if that proved a partnership existed, even without a piece of paper? This really opened up a fascinating question. Can your actions truly speak louder than words on a missing page? I mean, it really makes you wonder, right? How does a judge even begin to untangle a he said, she said mess like this when there's no paperwork? Well, the answer is they basically become detectives. They start digging through the history of the business, looking for patterns of behavior and specific actions to figure out what everyone really intended. And it's not just a guessing game. The court has this sort of checklist, you could call it an oral partnership test, to see if the siblings were actually acting like partners. Did they share the profits and the losses? Did they manage the deli together? And how did they describe themselves to outsiders, like the bank? The investigation was on. Okay, Exhibit A, the money. When the court looked at the deli's books, they found something very interesting. All three siblings, Timothy, Michael, and Eileen, each got a check for exactly $1,000 every single week, straight from the deli's profits. Now, that doesn't really sound like a boss paying an employee, does it? It sounds a lot more like partners splitting the profits. Then you look at who was actually running the place. And again, this wasn't some top-down operation with one boss calling all the shots. Timothy was handling the inventory and writing the checks. Michael was on site managing the day-to-day chaos of the deli, and Eileen was in charge of all the bookkeeping. They each had their own distinct, high-level role in the business. And if you needed any more proof, this one is a real kicker. When they went to the bank to set up the corporate account,
The official documents they filed listed Michael Murray as the president and Timothy Murray as the vice president. That's how they presented themselves to a financial institution, not as an owner and an employee, but as the top two officers of the corporation.
So the judge puts all these pieces together, the equal profit sharing, the shared management duties, the official bank documents, and came to a pretty stunning conclusion. Despite the missing contract, the siblings' actions were undeniable proof. They had intended to be partners, and they had acted like partners. An oral partnership, the court declared, did in fact exist. Now, just when you think this case couldn't get any stranger, let's talk about the leases for the deli. Because if you need more proof that this family's relationship with paperwork was messy, this bizarre little side story says it all. It perfectly highlights the court's whole point that what you intend can matter way more than what's written down on paper. Get this, in the span of just 4 months, they created not one, not two, but 3 different ridiculously long-term leases for the deli. First, a 60-year lease was drafted. The next month, a 70-year lease was signed. And then a few months after that, a 92-year lease was signed. I mean, who signs a 92-year lease for a deli? It makes absolutely no sense.
So what on earth was going on? Well, the court figured it out. It had nothing to do with actually renting the space. See, the state liquor authority required a valid lease to be on file before they would approve the transfer of the deli's very valuable liquor license to the new building. These leases weren't real. They were just bureaucratic hoops they had to jump through. And the court totally agreed. The judge ruled that the siblings never, for 1 second, intended to be bound by the crazy terms in those leases. They were signed for the sole purpose of moving that liquor license. And because the intent to actually form a real landlord-tenant agreement was completely missing, the judge declared all 3 leases void, useless.
So after all that drama, the missing contract, the oral partnership test, these totally phantom leases, how did the judge finally put an end to this family food fight?
The final verdict was actually pretty clean, and it came in 3 parts. First, the court made it official. A partnership did exist between Timothy, Michael, and Eileen, so Timothy was right all along. Second, because there was obviously so much bad blood, the judge ordered that the partnership be legally dissolved. And finally, third, an independent accountant was brought in to sort through all the finances and figure out how to divide the business assets fairly between the 3 of them. You know, the whole story of the Murrays is this incredible, powerful reminder. In the eyes of the law, your actions and your intentions can forge a bond that's every bit as strong as a signed contract. And it really leaves you with one last question to chew on. What informal handshake deals in your own life might just be a little more official than you realize?